Sometimes life is working, and that's the strange part. Nothing's wrong, exactly, but it just doesn't feel settled. It's a hard feeling to talk about. It can sound sort of ungrateful or vague, so most people don't say much about it. Instead, they stay busy, they stay moving, and rely on what already works. That feeling tends to show up when things run a little bit too smoothly, when habits take over, when days stop asking too much from you. Living somewhere unfamiliar, though, really interrupts that. When language, customs, and expectations don't run on autopilot anymore. What happens is everyday life kind of slows down and simple things take more effort. You can't rely on assumptions as easily. And then what happens? Something actually changes. Not everything, but just what you notice. At first, this kind of awareness is tiring. It feels like moving against a current you don't realize was there. You suddenly see how much of daily life depends on fluency, knowing how things work without having to sort of think about them. When that fluency disappears, everything sort of takes longer. But slowness does something interesting. It changes the pace. It changes your pace. A lot of places move fast on the surface, but underneath there's a kind of longer rhythm. Learning happens in layers. Progress comes through repetition. Effort is expected to take time. Things are built with the assumption that you'll still be there tomorrow. It's kind of less like sprinting towards an outcome, and it's more like walking a long distance. You don't keep checking how far you've gone, you just keep on moving. And over time, that changes how you feel time itself. Time stops feeling like something you're kind of behind on, and it starts feeling like something you're working with. And, this is where I come back to the idea of tuning. When you tune an instrument, you're actually not changing the music, you're adjusting yourself. You listen, you make a small correction, and then you kind of listen again. You accept that it's never really finished. And in some ways, living in unfamiliar conditions feels a lot like that, There's a constant adjustment, not to become someone else, but to hear more accurately. And hearing, of course, isn't the same as listening. Listening takes patience. It takes restraint. It means letting things unfold a little bit before deciding what they mean. In unfamiliar environments, listening usually comes before kind of understanding. Being familiar with things encourages speed. It encourages assumptions. When things work easily, attention drifts, but discomfort brings it back. In some ways, that's part of why creative work often deepens when things feel slightly out of balance. Music, for instance, doesn't reward impatience. You can't rush resonance. You can't really force depth. In unfamiliar places, opposites tend to exist at the exact same time. Speed and patience, pressure and endurance, intensity and long-term thinking. There's a phrase often attributed to Chinese that describes crisis as a mix of danger and opportunity. The translation is debated, but I think the idea sticks. Because living with uncertainty often feels like standing right there, where difficulty and possibility overlap. And this tension, it isn't cultural, it's really human. Any meaningful step into the unknown kind of carries this. You don't get clarity without uncertainty. You don't get perspective without distance. Which brings me back to distance. Distance itself doesn't fix anything. It doesn't make a disagreement disappear, but it changes what you end up paying attention to. If you think back, 1969, when the astronauts first looked back at Earth from space, they didn't see borders or systems or arguments. Instead, they saw something small and fragile, this little blue marble floating in space. The planet hadn't changed, the distance had. From far enough away, it becomes harder to insist that any one position is the center. You start noticing connection before contrast. Stepping into the unknown doesn't promise a destination, but it does change the view.